It passed the education committee the first time, but we have, again, found out more information. That was what was troubling to us, was we passed it, not understand, because see, it was entitled pupil services. Now, the ones we got in this latest packet for this month said safe schools on there. Okay, but they explained to us these were behavioral specialists for safe schools.
So, in my understanding, if I heard you correct, so the county already has 8 of these specialists, and this is a request to move to 10. So, are you, the information you gained, are you feeling that 8 is adequate, or you don't even like the idea of having?
I don't like the idea of them being there.
You don't, okay, so you don't like the idea of.
But I can't do anything about those 8, not yet.
Unfortunately or fortunately, it goes back to the failed motion earlier, but I would like to tweak it to come to my attention that the pass-through, some of that pass-through funding is holding up necessary technology for the school's panic alarms because the change in the radio system. So the panic alarms are not functioning properly right now. So my motion is to approve, add that to the agenda, that piece of the previous resolution of up to $150,000, unless someone has the exact dollar range. Somewhere around $100,000 of that pass-through funds is for that technology that we need, that we're holding up today. So that's my motion, is to add at least that portion of it. We can talk about the rest later. Thank you.
Mr. Attorney.
You ask, you can't line item a budget request from the school board, okay. So we're not able to take out just a portion and approve that. It has to be all or nothing. If they were to send a different proposal that asked for just that maybe
okay, so just
to use safe money, you could, but when it's the proposed amendment is from this grant and it's all included, it has to be all or nothing. So.
Okay. So a comment to that is our education chairman is effectively doing a lie down and veto by sending this information request back. Yes, he is. But I would move to reconsider the previous motion then.
At this time,
our panic alarms are not working. If anyone cares about that, then let's reconsider and vote on that tonight. Reconsider the previous motion that did fail.
All right, well, we'll reconsider. Which side were you on? Were you on the prevailing side?
I was.
Not.
No, I was not. Yeah.
Okay.
Only someone on the prevailing side.
I know that.
All right. Do I hear a motion
if anybody
to approve
like
the regular agenda?
Anybody like to?
Is there a second? All in favor signify by saying aye. All right. We have an agenda.
Mr. Chairman, just want to continue on onto the report. So next 2 items are pulled off the consent agenda. The first one is 2209-09. So this is approving fiscal year 2022-2023 Board of Education General Purpose Fund budget amendments. I imagine there's going to be some discussion on this one. I know Commissioner Brown and others had some questions on it.
Commissioner Rogers.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. This is something I've been following for quite some time. I will ask for guidance from the chair of which committee this should be sent back to. I believe there's some question. There we go. I believe there is some question as to where some of the money is appropriated, or where the money comes from and goes to. So with that, I guess at the very least, Mr. Chairman, should this go back to Budget Committee, or should it go back to Education and then through Budget?
Okay, let me say, first of all, having been a superintendent and director of schools, that this is a fine line we cannot line item things in the school system, as much as I'd love to sit here and do that, because I think I see at times money that needs to be placed better.
Yes, sir.
But you can ask questions. That is part of your job, and you don't have to approve budget amendments. That's part of your job too. Commissioner Brown.
Mr. Chairman, we have looked at these amendments quite thoroughly. We have met with Mr. Lawing, and we have also looked at a lot of other things as far as the coding and so on. We're trying to find out where this money is going. And I know that we had Ms. Joanna come up and talk about that. But we would like to, as far as the Education Committee, we would like to look at those things first before it does go back to the Budget Committee, so that we can give them a better recommendation on all of these things and wrap it up with a nice bow and pass it on. And so now we're down to Safe Schools grant. 3 and 4. Oh, there's the wind damage. That was budget number 3.
Correct.
Last meeting. So, this one was the one where we this one too, we talked about it. This was for the behavioral specialist and all.
I believe it's good as well, Mr. Chairman.
This is the new, this one, budget 3 and 4 is new. This one, you did talk about Safe Schools last one, that was a totally different one. This one is actually a new one that was presented on the 20th.
These are the carryover funds from the state.
And appropriation of additional funding.
Okay.
So this is a new one.
So I remember seeing that. That's where we got the explanation. Yeah, okay. It was the very first one, budget number 2. That was the one that had the personnel in it. Very first one. So this is additional to that. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I guess if I may,
Yes, go ahead.
the question would be, what is this additional 14,550? Is that already in the budget, or is this, obviously it says additional funding, where does that come from?
This is appropriated carryover. So this is being pulled. 7SS. What is 7SS code?
That's the program code that means Safe Schools, the Safe Schools grant.
Okay.
And those are funds that are appropriated by the state. That additional 14,000 is for the actual, we were given a provisional allocation, and so this is to make it the actual allocation. So what you...
So you may get it or may you not, and now you've got it.
Well, they say, here's what you're definitely going to get, and then we'll tell you exactly what you get. And so we got an extra $14,000.
So like
originally budgeted.
in early April, mid-April, they'll tell you what they think you're going to get, so you can go ahead and budget, and then they come back in August and say, here's what you actually get.
And of course, all that's dependent, if I can, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I'm just
Go ahead.
running off down here.
Go ahead.
And that's all dependent upon the confines or the legalities of the grant through the state, correct?
Any other discussion on this one right here? This is the first new one that we've come across. So budget amendment 3 and 4, which is addendum to the other one that we've already passed here last meeting. $85,000 for an in-service.
Those, in-services, I'm trying to see which one you're referring
I
to.
mean, that's just kind of a round number there.
Yeah, I mean, it's an estimate, obviously, but we send, every SRO goes to a week-long certification.
So this is for SRO training.
Some of this, yes. I don't know which line specifically you're referring to.
But it's right there in the middle, in-service.
Does it say?
Staff development, $85,000 right there in the middle.
Hold on, let me pull up the right page.
Well, the budget 3 and 4, amendment 3 and 4.
Yes, that is for, that's for training around our SROs, as well as our threat assessment and sort of behavioral intervention kind of things around students that are creating a safety issue in school.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, then I have another question, I guess, for not to get down a rabbit trail, but this 85,000 is for, you're saying that's for SRO training?
Yes, every year the SROs attend a post-certified or certification conference, and the school district funds that.
In Gatlinburg, is that correct? Very well, Mr. Chairman, I learned something new tonight. That's great. I thought that was funded by our,
You can take that back to your committee.
I thought that was funded by our sheriff's department, so that's good enough. Thank you. That's by state grant.
Anybody have any other questions about this?
What does safe schools do? Like, what are the metrics? How does it, what's the goal of it?
Well, there's legislation involved in several layers of it, but it's about creating physical safety, mental and emotional safety within the building, which means that students that are making threats to others or creating a safety issue in the building would be addressed by that as well. But it's also all of our physical safety items such as camera systems and door locks and visitor management, those kinds of things. So it's all the layers of school safety.
Correct me if I'm wrong though, but the state gets the money from the federal government because the federal government has a grant for safe schools.
I'm not aware, honestly. It's a formula grant that comes from the state, and we have to meet state criteria, and the SAVE Act is the state law that dictates what procedures and things we have to have in place. So I honestly don't know where the state gets the funding. I apologize.
Question, I get the physical piece as far as the building security, and I like that. But as far as the emotional support, the emotional health of the kids, I visited all the schools in my district, talked to the principals, the front educators, and that was the biggest thing that I had to take away from was the mental health of the kids and the need there. And that our teachers are not equipped to handle the problems that kids are bringing with them to school. The school, they don't originate at school. I personally believe they originate at home. But that's a whole other conversation we had, a whole other topic. How does a safe school, as far as the emotional health, how does that differentiate, or how is it different from a traditional guidance counselor, or is it?
Sure. So the training that you were asking about, the in-service, that is to give teachers a more detailed understanding of students that are in crisis, students that are experiencing trauma, and how you interact with them and the difference that can make in the outcome. Like a student that's just feeling anxious and having a conflict in the classroom, you can change the trajectory of that interaction just by your physical stance and how you approach the child. And so that's what that piece is about when students are starting to have a crisis, whether that's a threat of harm to themselves or others, then the teacher's interaction can mitigate that outcome. And then the second part you asked about was, I missed it.
Guidance counselor.
Oh, guidance, how that's different.
Is it different?
Okay, yes. So honestly, our school counselors would absolutely love to be able to help students in this way, but the needs of students are much greater in acuity and in number. And so the mental health supports that we have in place are people with further training that would be more specialized in those kinds of situations, like a social worker, which is not a part of this funding. So.
No, I mean, I know in Metro we had a lot more than just the guidance counselors at our schools because we had a lot more problems. But, going back to that, what's the staffing like as far as these are
So,
personnel concerned?
the staffing, this year we have 8 in the state schools department. We have 8 social workers that are considered crisis social workers. They're not funded by this funding, but they specialize in when students are in crisis, and that is either physically being there to help assess the student and handle the crisis, or it might be advising, because there's only 8 and there's almost 50 schools, and so they might advise who is in the building, the school counselor or the administrator.
Are these itinerant?
Yes.
Another question, with all 90, is the safe schools in all 95 of our counties, or are we just?
I believe so, yes. That's why it's a formula grant from the state. They say, you've got this many schools, this many kids, here's how much money you get.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? I know that there have been a lot of things that have transpired as far as families and schools have developed. And again, a lot of it's not in a positive direction, that's for sure. But hopefully with this, we may get a positive outlook. We'll see what happens down the road, I guess. I am concerned about the situation of, as what Commissioner Schoaf had brought out, about ideological concerns between 2 students, and then that one being shut down just because there's an expression of ideas there. So that's my biggest concern right there. We've got budget 3 and 4. Go ahead and make a motion.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, where are we?
3 and 4, safe schools.
So moved to approve.
Okay. Do I have a second? No second? Okay. Second will die.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add budget amendment 3 and 4 for Fund 141, 7SS School, Safe Schools Grant, Department, School Support and Safe Schools.
All right, motion's been made. Is there a second? Second. All right, motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Would you please vote?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, pardon me. Okay, Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm asking this to be put on the agenda. This is a budget amendment that didn't make it out of education. So after attending the education meeting, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me as to why this budget amendment would not have been approved for our Safe Schools program. So just doing a little bit of research and just talking with several different parties to figure out all the parts, pieces, and the processes for the items contained in this request. For those that aren't familiar with the Safe Schools program, it's a professional development and security-related activities and supplies to support school safety through crisis intervention, school resource officer training, violence prevention, social and emotional wellness within all Sumner County K through 12 schools. And so the school board, they submitted an amendment to request the student support and safe schools funding. The original grant funding in the budget was a minimum estimate from the state, and the actual grant received was higher than the minimal estimate budgeted. So this appropriation request was for funding the following: guidance personnel, contracted services, which is STARS counselors, supplies, materials, and equipment, in-service and staff development, training for SROs. Also along with that were some long-term disability, Social Security, state retirement, and Medicaid contributions. So Mr. Chairman, these services, they directly impact the safety of our students and teachers on a daily basis. And so I'm having a hard time understanding as to why we would hold this up and not approve state funding for our school safety out of this committee. So now these are state funds, and they've got specific designations for specific purposes. So per the state, here's what those funds are designated for. Facility security and planning, school safety personnel, violence prevention, training and drills, and behavioral health. Now, per code, the Tennessee Code Annotated 49-6, 801 through 814, which is also known as the SAVE Act, it requires our schools to provide services to ensure physical safety and access to mental health services, and the state Safe School funding grants, which were asked for in this appropriation, are the mechanisms that pays for the requirements within the SAVE Act. So in committee, there was very little discussion, and it doesn't appear there's really much concern about our student safety. Now, I've spent some time and I've met with a lot of people, talking with teachers and principals and administrators, SROs, even went to the length of talking to the STARS organization, their CEO, just to learn more about what services are impacted, what services are provided, and then to validate what actually happens within our school system. So here's what actually happens in Sumner County Schools with this funding. So our SROs, they're more than security guards. They have a threefold role. They serve as law enforcement, they often serve as counselor, and they also serve as a teacher. So they're required to teach at least 2 classes per week on law enforcement related topics. Now, the state requires 16 hours of specialty training annually, and this is on top of the 40 hours of training that these SRs have to go through. And within this training, which this funding would pay for, school laws reviewed, juvenile laws reviewed, threat assessments, rapport building, SRO responsibilities, and legal updates, specifically and such as for special education law. So to fulfill this annual training, our SROs are sent to a state conference. It's post-approved, and it's the Tennessee School Resource Officer Association hosts that. So without this funding, who's going to pay for this required service for SROs? You know, should the county absorb that cost, since we're not going to approve the state funding? Would the sheriff eat that in his budget? Or should we just pass the cost on to the individual SRO to have to pay for that out of pocket, since it's part of their job? So I don't think so. I don't think any of that's even appropriate. There's state funding available. And that state funding covers the cost of this program. So by choosing not to fund this, our standards and quality of our SRO program will be impacted. So let's talk about STARS counselors. So information about STARS is located on the Sumner County School website under the Community Resource section. Seeing or consulting with a STARS counselor is not a required activity, nor is it part of required curriculum. Students engaged in this service is voluntary. They decide whether to talk to or to share with a mental health professional or not. For those of you who don't know about STARS, STARS stands for Students Taking a Right Stand, and they provide Student Assistance Program, SAP for short, which is an award-winning, evidence-based program that addresses social and emotional barriers for youth. Their services are centered around prevention and intervention in academic and mental health. The mental health, they cover conflict, anxiety, depression, trauma, bullying prevention. Within the prevention, the efforts are to help students to make good, positive decisions in life. So the staff of STARS, the counselors, they're contracted employees with social worker certifications mental health degrees, and they're licensed professionals. So each school has an opportunity to select their STARS counselor. And so what that means is the very person that hires the teachers that teach our kids on a daily basis gets to determine which counselors are most appropriate fit for their schools and our students. So the counselors are, they're following state guidelines for mental health treatments and are not pushing for a political or moral ideology on our children. So some folks asked, I think in the gallery, you know, if there were metrics and what are the measures? Well, here's some metrics and measures of STARS. Just had to ask for it, Sumner County specific. So here's some numbers for you guys. Based on STARS staff reported data across Sumner County Schools, this is for years 21 through 22, they conducted 298 classroom assembly and community prevention presentations, including Red Ribbon Week activities, Prom Promise activities, Mental Health Awareness Month, and Bullying Awareness Month, just to name a few. Who attended to 576 incidents, attended to 51 critical incidents, in which are situations in which presenting issues are severe enough to warrant calling parents, informing principals, contacting DCS, initiating suicide protocol, etc. So this program reached a total of about 1,066 unduplicated students. So 1,066 students use this service. Now there's a positive note here that 3 Beach High School peer leaders were selected to serve as Sumner County Tennessee Strong ambassadors for the state of Tennessee TN Strong program. So what are the risk factors that STARS addressed? And this is taken from intakes, the same time period. 7% of students reported prior substance abuse or substance use. 24% reported family conflict issues they needed help dealing with. 12% of students needed assistance with basic living needs. 14% of students exhibited self-harming behavior. 34% of students, that's a third of the students, reported significant issues with anxiety. And 22% experienced other mental health issues. So now the students who participated in this group, in a group or more than 2 individual counseling sessions, this is the feedback that they gave. So 91% reported they felt positive about their future. 88% reported they learned healthy ways to cope with stress and anxiety. 85% of students reported that they understood the dangers of alcohol, tobacco, vapes, juuls, and other drug use. 87% of students reported they know how to handle and resist peer pressure. 99% of students said they would recommend STARS to friends who needed help. And 95% of students reported that they had made positive changes in their life after participating in STARS services. Now, Mr. Chairman, our kids, they're dealing with things that no one in this chamber had to deal with at their age. And I think reading some of this stuff, the statistics, it shows that this program works. And so while we're not funding it, it's a head scratcher. So let's talk about social emotional learning, SEL, or it's referred to as Character Strong curriculum here in Sumner County. So this curriculum does not contain any CRT material or references to racial equality as a part of the curriculum. So it's actually prevented by state law. House Bill 0580, it prohibits teaching or introducing deceptive concepts. And the school that does so risks losing their funding. So it seems like that's a pretty good incentive not to do something that we don't want them to do. So SEL in Sumner County focuses on the following: responsible choices, cooperative learning, self-reflection and self-awareness, and assessment. So the K through 5 curriculum, it's called Purposeful People. It's built upon the top 10 most identified traits that thoughtfully develop character skills at the elementary level. These skills are courage, perseverance, honesty, respect, gratitude, kindness, responsibility, cooperation, creativity, and empathy. The Character Strong Middle School curriculum is designed to establish a strong foundation of social and emotional skills among students by teaching healthy habit development, social awareness strategies, and empathy-building techniques. Now, at the meeting, I did hear concerns about a survey that was used to collect feedback. And I was surprised to learn that the examples given from the survey at the committee meeting were actually from Nashville Public School System. It's not even a survey used in Sumner County. So the more I dug into the Safe Schools and Sumner County's program, the more I came to realize there is no boogeyman lingering in the dark or operating an indoctrination program to subvert the morals of any of us in this room. So all this funding directly benefits the safety of our students and teachers and provides other safety-related materials our schools need. All of this is being held up because of the only concern raised at the Education Committee meeting was about how the schools may handle students with different ideologies. It's a valid concern. But there's another elected body, it's called the school board, that makes policy decisions on those types of discussions. So now this body, we've got a lot of good work to do. And penalizing the safety of our students and teachers, I don't believe falls into that bucket of good work. So our kids deserve better, and our teachers deserve better. So I move to add this budget amendment to our agenda tonight so we can approve this funding for our schools. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
To a couple of notes that Commissioner Wynn just brought up, because I actually, there were three things that I brought up in the Education Committee. And the first one you spoke to some degree. What I asked for was not metrics. What I asked for were outcomes. And there is a difference. If you're going to build a program, the first thing you do is ask, does it work? So every metric that Commissioner Wynn just cited was about activity. We did this many outreaches. We did, had this many touch points. That's what you typically use in business to build a marketing packet. What matters is outcomes. How can I show that my program worked against a control group? And that question was not answered. The second was about, I asked about, does difference of ideology, would that be considered bullying? There was some answer of that question in there. I kind of was willing to let that one, somewhat sufficiently answered. I think there's still some questions as to how broadly do we define bullying, terms that we throw out there. If you're against this, if you're against this bill or you're against this thing, you're against the children. How can you be for bullies? But what you have to think about are the second and third order effects, and that brings me to the next thing I'm going to mention here. The third thing that I brought up was the most important one in my view, and it came up again in the Budget Committee. And that was about tracking and profiling. So the question I had was, does this program track and profile individual students at the individual level, profiling them such that they, you can kind of try to predict their behavior? And the answer at the Education Committee was that no, that's not what's reported on. A discussion that I had during the Budget Committee was that the entire purpose of the program was to see how people behave over time so that you could intercept their behavior and give somebody a snack or something like that. Look, I'm not saying that these things are ill-intended. I don't think there's there's any ill intent. There's nothing evil here. What I'm arguing for is, and what I asked for is for diligence to make sure that you're not building a program that has second and third order effects which are more detrimental than the initial problem that you're trying to solve. So, what the committees decided was to refer this back to the Education Committee for more diligence. That's what it's for. and I think that's fair. I think these questions still, this is what this is for. This body is here to do diligence. That's what I think. I know the school board is also here to do diligence, but as a funding body, do we want to fund programs that may have second or third order effects that we haven't fully thought through?
With 14 no votes, we will wait on this for clarification from the school system.
What's your recommendation, Mr. Brown?
So, as I said, discussion, we already have 8 itinerant specialists, and the social emotional learning content that these specialists bring is not something that we need in Sumner County. We've had counselors and school psychologists in the schools for decades, and while some of these employees may have overstepped their bounds in the child-parent relationship, I don't believe that we need to add another layer of counseling as far as this is concerned that includes the SEL. We do not need adults to help children to get in touch with their feelings outside of the parental relationship. If there is behavior that is observed, it is the duty of the teacher, the counselor, etc., to report the behavior to the parent first, and in unusual circumstances to the proper authorities. However, we do not need adults trying to figure out a child's gender when our Supreme Court justice doesn't know if she's a woman. I'm all for supporting our school resource officers, SROs, with all the training necessary, as well as equipment to make the schools safer. This area of support is what is making a school safer. It's all about not hiding a misleading, benign name which allows for indoctrination of children outside of the parents' purview. There are teachers that are afraid to address some students because of their gender identification. I thought as a minister, God was being simplistic when he said in Genesis 1:27, God created man in his own image. And in the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. Then I saw the wisdom of God and the folly of man who has been trying to devolve or change the first instituted created by God, which is the family. The students in Sumner County Schools are not all of our children, as President Biden remarked, or that it takes a village, not meaning the extended family, but the government, as former First Lady Hillary Clinton said. School and state have overstepped their bounds in the student relationship and the parent's self-determination for their child. Just like the government, the public schools are paid for by the citizen and are subject to their needs. These are budget requests that are for safe schools made with federal money outside of the, for the Board of Education's approval only, and that are outside of this legislative body's scope. Now, these are later on, and the ones that I've mentioned earlier, that we have no say-so as the Board of Education. My recommendation for the board of school board is to revisit these budget education appropriations. But as far as this goes, I would like to deny this budget request.
I do want to remind everyone that we have to approve or deny all of the amendments. We can't line item what they suggest.
That's the point. Go ahead.
But this did pass education.
It passed the education committee the first time, but we have, again, found out more information. That was what was troubling to us, was we passed it, not understand, because see, it was entitled pupil services. Now, the ones we got in this latest packet for this month said safe schools on there, okay? But they explained to us these were behavioral specialists for safe schools.
So, my understanding, if I heard you correct, so the county already has 8 of these specialists, and this is a request to move to 10. So are you, the information you gained, are you feeling that 8 is adequate, or you don't even like the idea of having?
I don't like the idea of them being there.
You don't, okay, so you don't like the idea of.
But I can't do anything about those 8, not yet.